The sky above Zuratel cracked open. A ball of fire tore through the clouds, leaving behind a trail of black smoke. Every tribe, every creature, every living being on the surface looked up. Some dropped to their knees, thinking it was a god falling from the stars. Others grabbed their weapons, ready for anything. But no one expected a human. Captain Elias Ward was dying. At least he thought he was. His ship had taken damage near the edge of an unknown system. A burst of plasma from an unseen source had fried the engines. There was no time to call Earth, no time to fix anything. Just time to fall. Now strapped into the cockpit of a burning wreck, Elias saw the trees of a strange alien planet rushing up toward Embrace. He muttered to himself, "Or die." The crash was violent. Metal screamed. Trees exploded into splinters. Sparks flew across the control panel, and Elias blacked out as the ship slammed into the jungle floor with a thunder that echoed for miles. Hours later, smoke still rose from the wreck. Elias opened his eyes. Pain stabbed through his ribs. Blood covered his face. He couldn't feel his left leg. His translator implant was dead. His cums were broken. He was alone. And worse, this was no uninhabited rock. He heard voices, alien voices. They were getting closer. Elias reached for his sidearm. Gone. He pulled himself from the shattered cockpit, every movement a scream through his nerves. His eyes adjusted to the dim red sky. Shapes moved through the trees tall, armored aliens with spiked weapons and glowing eyes. They had already surrounded the crash site. Elias limped backward. Behind him, the burning ship. In front of him, 10 armed aliens. He didn't know their language. Didn't know if they wanted to kill him, study him, or eat him. But one thing was clear: they weren't friendly. A large alien stepped forward. Its armor was made of bone and stone. It raised a weapon like a massive club and shouted something in a deep, growling tongue. Elias couldn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. Surrender. The alien grinned and stepped closer. Elias didn't move. Another alien approached from the side. Smaller, younger, curious. It pointed at Elias's chest, leaned in, and tried to grab a piece of his jacket. Mistake and a blur. Elias reached for the nearest shard of metal from the wreckage and slammed it into the young alien's arm. The scream was horrible. The larger alien roared and charged. Elias rolled too. The side just in time. The club smashed into the ground where he'd stood. Dirt flew everywhere. He swung the metal shard again, cutting deep into the attacker's leg. They hadn't expected a fight. The aliens backed off. Elias, bleeding and panting, stood tall. His hands were shaking, his chest burned, but he faced them all, eyes wild and ready. He didn't speak, but they heard his message clearly. "Come any closer, and I will end you," the leader of the group snarled. Something at the others. They didn't attack. They watched, curious, confused. One of them knelt beside the injured, young alien, and dragged them away. The rest stayed in a wide circle. Elias, swaying on his feet, stepped back toward the broken ship. He had to survive, had to hold them off. Just until a flash of pain shot through his skull, his vision blurred. Then dashed darkness. He collapsed. When he woke again, was in a cage, a rough metal cell built into a stone camp deep in the jungle. Strange symbols were carved into the walls. Fires crackled. Alien eyes stared through the bars. They had taken him prisoner. His wounds had been roughly bandaged, his arms chained behind him, his legs set with a splint. They wanted him alive. Why? It couldn't ask. He couldn't speak to them, and they couldn't understand him. Over the next day, more aliens came to look at him. Some poked at him. Others just stared. A few laughed. A child threw food at him. Elias said nothing, but he watched. He listened to the rhythms of their speech. He studied their gestures. He memorized the guard shifts, and he waited. On the third night, something changed. A tall female alien approached the cage. She wore a crown of sharpened crystal and armor, dyed in deep red. The other aliens fell silent as she passed. This was someone important. A queen. She stopped in front of Elias and studied him. He stared back, refusing to bow. She said something soft. Her tone was almost curious. Then she snapped her fingers. A guard dragged a small alien child into view, a servant who had spilled something earlier. The queen raised her hand and struck the child hard. Across the face, the camp fell silent. Elias didn't move at first, but then slowly. He stood, his chains rattled. The queen looked amused. Elias took a step forward, then another. With a sudden roar, he lunged and slammed his shoulder into the cage door. The old metal creaked. Again. Blood spilled from his hands. The guards moved to stop him, but it was too late. With a final shout, Elias broke through the cage and tackled the nearest guard. The camp exploded in chaos. Elias fought like a wild animal. No words, no mercy. Only instinct and fury. He knocked one alien unconscious with a stolen weapon, kicked another into a fire, and grabbed the child. Pulling them behind him, the guards swarmed. Still chained, still limping, Elias fought on, and then suddenly, horn blew, everything stopped. The queen raised her hand. The guards froze. Elias stood panting, covered in bruises and blood. The child trembled behind him. The queen looked at him and laughed. She said something that made her warriors chuckle. She was impressed. She called him something in her tongue, Torvek. Later, Elias would learn what it meant, the unspoken fire. That night, the entire planet started whispering about the strange alien who didn't speak their words, but made a warrior queen pause, and made her people watch in silence. In the shadows of the jungle, a rebel scout saw everything. She raced back to her hidden camp and whispered to her leader, "He doesn't speak, but we must listen." The sun of Zeretel rose with a blood-red glow inside the jungle fortress of the Grelva. Captain Elias Ward was chained to a stone post in the middle of their arena. His arms were spread, blood dried on his face, and a deep wound pulsed. On his side, he hadn't eaten in 2 days. All around him, tall, armored aliens stood in rows, laughing, shouting, pointing. They didn't speak his language, but Elias didn't need a translator to understand what was happening. This was a show, and he was the main act, from a high throne carved into black stone. The queen of the Gralva watched with cold amusement. She remembered the human, the Torvek, the unspoken fire who had slammed through steel just to protect a servant child. That kind of rage, that kind of spirit, fascinated her, but it also threatened her rule. And so today, she would break him in front of everyone. The crowd fell quiet as the queen raised her hand. She gave a sharp command in her native tongue. From the far gate of the arena, a beast emerged, a Skarok. A hulking creature with 4 legs, tusks like blades, and skin like iron bark. It snarled as it was led forward by chains. The aliens cheered. The queen stood. She pointed at Elias and said something with a cruel smile, a translator. Dronold and Glitching hovered overhead and repeated her words in broken English. "Let beast speak with him." The chains holding Elias snapped open. He dropped to one knee, weak. His body ached, his vision blurred. But as the Skarok charged, he moved fast. Elias rolled sideways, barely dodging the beast's first strike. Dust and blood flew. The crowd screamed. The beast turned with a snarl. Elias grabbed the broken chain still attached to his wrist and wrapped it around his fist. When the Skarok lunged again, he slammed that fist into its snout twice. Again, the beast roared in pain. It wasn't enough to kill it. But now, it was angry and cautious. They circled each other. Elias didn't think in words anymore. Just movement. Just instincts. Just survival. He found a broken spear on the ground, snapped in half, but sharp at one end. He grabbed it. Skarok charged again. This time Elias didn't dodge. He ran straight at it. At the last second, he rolled under the beast's tusks and drove the broken spear straight into its side. The Skarok howled and fell. Blood sprang across the sand. The entire arena fell silent. Then cheers, screams, chants not of mockery, of awe. The queen stared. Stunned, the humans had always been seen as soft, weak, too civilized, too restrained. But this one fought like the ancient warriors of legend. He didn't need a voice. He spoke with violence, too. Guard stepped forward to drag Elias back into the cage. He didn't resist, but then it happened. The small alien servant from earlier, the one Elias had saved, stepped in front of the guards. They said something sharp, protective, angry. The guards hesitated. More servants gathered behind the child, then a cook, then a young warrior. They didn't all speak the same dialect, but they were united in silence. The queen watched as lower ranks gathered behind the human. She could feel her control slipping that night. Elias sat in chains once more, but something was different. Food was brought to him, fresh, warm food. His wounds were cleaned properly, and from the darkness beyond the cage, a whisper came in broken English. We listen. We follow. Tomorrow, we leave. The next morning, the rebellion began. When the guards came to move Elias, they didn't expect resistance. They were wrong. One had his throat crushed by a chain. Another was choked into silence. By the time the alarm sounded, Elias and 5 rebels were already gone, running deep into the jungle, vanishing into smoke. The queen screamed orders, but her warriors hesitated. They weren't sure whose side they were on anymore. Elias and his rescuers ran for miles. Through rivers, over cliffs, to thick fog. At last, they reached an ancient ruin hidden in the mountains. There, the Zertal resistance waited, and when they saw him bleeding, breathing and still defiant, they dropped to one knee. Not because he was human, not because he had spoken, but because he had acted, and his actions had roared, louder than 1,000 words. That night around the fire, a rebel leader stepped forward. He placed a curved blade at Elias's feet. "You are not just the fire," he said in broken English. "You are the first spark." Far away, the queen received a report. The silent one escaped. With half our staff, she clenched her fists and send the deadliest shadows we have. The jungle was quiet. It's quiet. But deep within its twisted roots and stone ruins, a storm was rising, and it didn't need a voice. Captain Elias Ward crouched on the edge of a mossy cliff, watching the enemy patrol pass below, his hands gripped a sharpened branch. The other Zalian rebels hid beside him, breathing slow and silent. The Gralva. Soldiers passed without noticing. That was mistake number 1. The rebels struck like lightning. One dropped from a tree and snapped a guard's neck. Another tossed a flash fruit and exploding seed that blinded the patrol. Elias leapt down, landed behind the commander, and drove his blade into the back of the alien's armor. They didn't scream. They didn't shout. The mission was clean, quiet, complete in under 2 minutes. Elias stood, breathing hard, surrounded by dead enemies. The rebels stared at him. One whispered, "He kills like thunder, but walks like shadow." Back at the rebel base, built in the ancient stone ruins of a forgotten race, leaders gathered. The underground resistance had been hiding for years, fragmented, fearful, but now, with the unspoken fire among them, everything had changed. They watched Elias train their fighters, not with words, but with action. He showed them how to ambush from above, how to use the terrain, how to strike hard and vanish. The rebels mimicked him, and they learned fast. Among them was Raka, a young female fighter who had once served the queen as a scout. Now she fought beside Elias. She didn't understand his words, but she understood his eyes. Every time Elias looked at a map, every time he pointed, every time he nodded toward danger, Akka followed. He didn't ask, he just led. The Gralva didn't take long to notice. Outposts began falling one by one. Small units disappeared into the mist. Weapons caches exploded in the night. Supply lines were poisoned. Panic spread. The queen sent new orders. She called the rebels ghosts and ordered her elite forces to crush the uprising. But her words no longer mattered. The people had already heard a louder message. One night, as the moon hung low over Zuratel, the resistance struck the main supply camp outside Varnkour Regia, massive depot that fed the entire Growl, the army in the north. The rebels snuck in, with vines tied across their backs. Disguised as slaves, they moved silently. Waiting for Elias's signal, he walked calmly into the center of the camp and dropped a stolen Gralva banner onto the ground. The guards yelled. He didn't flinch. When the torches lit his face, they saw the scars of the human, the unspoken fire. He pointed to the sky. A flash. And then fire rained down. Explosives hidden in the trees exploded. Fire swept through the camp. Rebels attacked from every side. And in the center of it, Elias fought like a hurricane. Not a word. Not a battle cry. Just fury and silence. Hours later, smoke cleared. Varnkour Ridge was no more, and the resistance had weapons, armor, food, far for the east. Queen's Black Citadel. Panic spread through the court. Her generals argued. Her assassins had failed. Enemies grew stronger each day, and still this silent human survived. He doesn't even speak. One shouted, "But his actions speak louder than all our orders," said another. The queen stared at her burning map. Whole regions were rising against her rule. She whispered, "If I cannot silence him with blades, I will drown him in blood." Back at the ruins, Raka sat beside Elias near the fire. She handed him a carved bone pendant. "It means leader of storms," she said in her tongue. Elias nodded, understanding the feeling, even if he didn't know the words, around them. The rebels chanted softly, not in celebration, but in unity. One raised a hand and said, "He doesn't speak like us, but his fire lit a path we now walk." The next day, the resistance was no longer in hiding. They marched, villages opened their gates, old warriors returned to the fight, and behind it all walked a silent man-scarred, bloodied human. The galaxy wouldn't hear his voice, but now it would feel his presence. Night fell like a blade. Thick fog rolled over the jungle hills of Zuratel, hiding shadows that didn't belong. Far above the rebel camp, 7 silent shapes moved between the trees fast, precise, without sound. They were the Neardrak, the Queen's most feared assassins, trained since birth, bred for silence. Death was their language, and tonight their target was the human who didn't speak. At the ruined fortress that served as the rebel base, Captain Elias Ward sat beside a dim fire, sharpening a blade made from crashed ship metal. His ears twitched. At every rustle, his eyes scanned the trees. He didn't sleep. He hadn't, not in days. Something was wrong. Inside the camp, rebels laughed, relaxed. Varnkour Ridge had been a big victory. Spirits were high. But Elias had seen enough war to know victory. Always invited danger, and danger had already arrived, in the darkness beyond the firelight. A Neardrak crouched, watching. They wore armor that melted into the jungle. Their skin was marked with silent kill tattoos. Their weapons were sharp, curved, and poisoned. The lead assassin raised 2 fingers. The others spread out, ready to strike. But Elias was already moving. He stood, slow and silent, scanning the trees. Raka stepped beside him. "Is it?" He didn't answer. He simply pointed at the shadows, and then disappeared into them. Minutes later, the first scream tore through the camp. Not from the rebels, from a dying assassin. A young sentry found the body impaled on a spear made from a broken cum tower. A message was carved into the wood, in alien runes. "I see you." Panic spread. The rebels grabbed weapons. But Elias didn't return to camp. He was hunting one by one. In the fog and vines, the assassins fell. Elias moved like an animal, silent, deadly. His blade struck from behind. His traps snapped necks and split legs. They came to kill him quietly, but he killed them in complete silence. The last one, the leader of the Neardrak, tried to run. Blood poured from her side. She leaped through the trees, desperate to vanish into the mist. But Elias was waiting. He dropped from above and landed without a sound. She raised her dagger. He knocked it away, slammed her to the ground, and pressed a boot to her throat. She stared at him. There was no fear, only confusion. Why didn't he speak? Elias leaned closer. Then he whispered, not in her language, but with a cold voice that needed no translation. You don't need words to know when it's over. And then it was by sunrise. The jungle was still again. 7 bodies lay buried beneath rocks and vines. None had returned to the queen. Back at the citadel, his messenger arrived, breathless, shaking. The queen stood, her eyes sharp. Report. Messenger stammered. They're gone. The queen narrowed her eyes. All of them. He nodded. She laughed, not a happy laugh, but a bitter, angry one. He speaks in silence. He kills in shadows. And now, even my assassins listen to him from the grave. Across Zuratel, the legend of the unspoken fire grew. Children whispered of a human who never talked, but who could burn down armies, even. Among the Grelva soldiers, fear spread. They began asking questions. Who was this human? Why did he fight with no words? What gave him this strength? In the rebel camp, Elias returned before dawn. He dropped the last assassin's blade at Raka's feet. The rebels stared in silence. No victory speech, no celebration, just a silent warrior. That what had to be done. Later that day, a new rebel. Banner was raised. It showed no name. Emblem. Just a red handprint and a single black slash through it. The symbol of the man who spoke with actions, not words. And deep in space, a beacon crackled to life. Buried in the wreckage of Ilias's crashed ship, something blinked. -green.earth had received the signal. It was buried beneath stone, mud, and fire, forgotten after the crash, dead, like the wreckage around it. But then, a spark, a flicker, and suddenly, a green light blinked inside the shattered body of Elias Ward's ship. The distress beacon had come back online, and far above, across cold, silent space Earth was listening. Inside the rebel fortress, Elias stared at the blinking green pulse. A small shard of hope. One he thought he'd never see again, his makeshift repair team. Made of alien engineers and human instinct, had rewired parts of the ship's core reactor. They didn't speak his language, but they followed his hands, his nods, his urgency, and now it had paid off. The signal was out, somewhere back on Earth. Someone would see it. Raka stepped beside Elias, eyes wide with wonder. What is it? She asked. Elias didn't answer. He simply showed her the small screen. A faint message glowed. Signal, sent status. Weak but stable response. PNDING for the first time in weeks. Elias allowed himself a breath of hope. He didn't know if help would come. But now, the silence between stars had been broken. Meanwhile, deep in Earth's solar command, a technician named Arjun Del sipped cold coffee and blinked at his console. Then, he froze. The screen lit up with something impossible. A signal, human code, from Zuratola planet, long listed as unreachable.
Presumed dead.
Captain Elias Ward, Arjun whispered. You're still alive? He slammed the emergency alert. Within minutes, Earth's Defense Command was fully awake. Aboard the orbiting warship Vanguard, General Adira Holt received the report. She had once personally signed off the mission to search for Elias, but after, no sign for months, they had declared him lost. Now her eyes narrowed as she read the transmission log. He's not just alive, she muttered. He's sending us battlefield coordinates. Back on Zerato, Elias uploaded everything he had. Maps of enemy camps, locations of rebel hideouts, weak points in the Queen's territory, images of destroyed outposts, faces of Grelva, leaders all, without saying a word, just actions. Just data. Just the truth. That night, a soft hum echoed through the jungle. The rebels watched in silence as small drones rose into the skies salvaged from Elias's ship, now reprogrammed to act as signal boosters. They climbed higher and higher, and then vanished into the stars. Across the camp, the mood shifted. Hope spread like wildfire. For the first time, the rebels spoke of victory, not just survival. They whispered to each other, "He's calling gods from the sky. His silence reaches beyond planets. He's not just the unspoken fire anymore. He's the voice of Earth." But not everyone celebrated. At the Black Citadel, the Queen of the Gralva smashed her throne in fury. "You let him rebuild his ship?" she screamed at her generals. "You let him call more of his kind?" The court trembled. She raised her hand. "Then we will send a message of our own." The next day, screams echoed from the rebel village of Carnessa. The Queen's warbeasts had struck without warning, massive. Armored monsters with flamecasters mounted to their backs. The rebels fought hard, but many died. It wasn't a battle, it was a punishment. When Elias and his team arrived, it was too late. He walked through burning huts, broken weapons, and scorched symbols. Raka stood beside him. Tears in her eyes. He said nothing, but the look on his face, cold, calm, dangerous. He picked up the body of a fallen child, carried it to the center of the ruins, and then, using rebel ink and broken stone, he drew a new mark on the ground. A burning flag. With a line through it, "No more hiding, no more waiting." War had come that night. Elias stood atop the walls of the fortress, staring into the stars. Raka stepped beside him and whispered, "Will your people come?" Elias didn't look at her. He just raised a finger to the sky and pointed in the distance. A tiny shimmer broke the clouds. A ship, then 2, then 5. Earth had answered. They came without sound. No lights. No warning. Just 5 Earth ships, gliding silently through Zeridal supper skies. Their hulls were dark steel, their engines whispered like ghosts, and yet every sensor across the planet screamed. In the rebel camp, eyes turned upward. For weeks they had followed Elias Ward, the man who spoke no words, but led with fire and fury. Now they looked to the sky and saw what he had called reinforcements. Earth had come. General Adira Holt, standing aboard the Vanguard, stared at the planet below. She had seen hundreds of battlefields, but never one where a single man had changed the tide. The footage from Elias's signal was clear. He had built a rebellion with no translator, no weapons, and no orders. Just will, just presence. She gave her order. Drop a mobile command hub, deploy aid to rebel forces, and find Captain Ward, down below, in the Black Citadel, the Queen. Of the Gralva watched the sky burn. Her generals shouted about retreat, about surrender. She silenced them with one gesture. "They think this is over," she said, voice cold. "They think he has already won." She walked to her throne and removed the crown from her head. "Let them come. I will break him myself." That night, under the glow of the twin moons, Elias stood at the edge of a rebel convoy. His eyes were on the horizon on the citadel. His leg still ached from the crash. His arm was wrapped in bandages. He hadn't spoken a word, but the rebels gathered around him like gravity. Soldiers, healers, children, hunters, aliens from broken villages, all united behind a silent man. Raka stepped beside him. "She will wait for you," she said, "in the throne room." "Do you know this?" Elias nodded once and began walking. The assault on the Queen's citadel was fast, brutal, and precise. Earth's drop teams hit the outer defenses, first TMP bursts, rail drones, shock squads. Then came the rebels screaming, running, rising like a storm of fire and steel. Elias led them up the stone steps, past burning banners, through enemy lines. Every soldier who stood in his way fell, not because of fear, but because of doubt. Inside the heart of the citadel, the Queen waited. She wore no armor, no crown, only old battle scars and pride. When Elias entered the throne room, smoke and fire at his back, she didn't move. She studied him. This small, silent creature from a forgotten world. "So, you've come to end this," she said. "No." "Answer." She stood. "You've stirred a planet, broken armies, stolen my people. Still, he didn't speak. But now you face me, alone. He stepped forward. The queen drew 2 curved blades from her back and charged. Their battle was not elegant, it was raw. Flesh against metal. She was faster. He was smarter. She swung high, he ducked, and drove his shoulder into her gut. She sliced his thigh, he dropped low and knocked her off balance. They crashed through stone pillars, blood spilling across marble floors. Around them, fires burned. The throne cracked, and at last he pinned her down. She tried to speak again, but Elias simply grabbed her weapon, snapped it in 2. The sound echoed like thunder. He didn't kill her. He didn't need to. The message was already written. Across every wall, every broken window, every voice in the streets below, her reign was over. Outside the citadel, rebels and soldiers cheered. The Gralva laid down their weapons, and high above, Earth's ships pulled back. They didn't need to fire a single shot, because the man they once called lost had already won the war. Later that night, General Holt found Elias sitting at the edge of the citadel wall. He was bruised, bleeding, quiet. She sat beside him, wanting water. "We got your signal," she said, loud and clear. Still no reply. She looked at him, then out at the city now lit with torches of freedom. "I've commanded entire fleets," she said softly, "but I've never seen anything like this." Elias said nothing. She smiled. "You didn't speak? They heard you. All of them." The war was over. The queen had fallen. But something strange happened the moment Earth's landing ships touched the ground. Everyone asked for Elias, from burned villages to rebel cities, from stone towers to jungle hideouts. The people wanted to see the human who never spoke, yet changed everything. They didn't care about Earth's generals. They didn't care about shiny uniforms or new weapons. They didn't care about flags or politics. They asked one question: where is the unspoken fire? On the main platform of the former Queen's Citadel, Earth's officers tried to organize things: medical camps, refugee centers, food lines, communications. But the crowds kept gathering. Aliens of all kinds, former slaves, rebel fighters, even enemy soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting not for aid, not for orders, but for him. Inside the war room, General Holt frowned at the reports. "We're trying to set up a command post, but the locals won't listen to us," her assistant said. "They keep asking for Captain Ward." Ch. She shook her head in amazement. "He never said a single word," she whispered. "And yet they trust him more than any of us." Elias Ward stood on the top floor of the broken citadel, looking down at the planet he had once crashed into. The fires had stopped. The fighting was over. But now came something harder: healing, and the people were looking to him. Raka entered the room. Her armor was scratched and faded, but she held herself with pride. "They wait for you," she said softly. Elias didn't respond, just walked past her and stepped onto the edge of the citadel's wide balcony. Below him, thousands stood in silence. No one cheered. No one spoke. They simply looked up, waiting. Elias stared at them for a long moment. Then, slowly, he raised his hand, open palm. Fingers spread. It wasn't a salute. It wasn't a command. It was a gesture of peace, of enough, of it's over. "We survived." And then the crowd responded, not with shouting, but with 1,000 hands raised back at him. No translator needed. They understood, back in orbit. Earth's command crews watched the footage, the AI running public diplomacy. Channels analyzed the moment and flagged it. Cultural icon detected. Human identifier. Elias Ward. Local classification. Symbol of unity. Earth didn't argue, they just adjusted their plans. From now on, every team sent to Zuratal was told, work with the locals. Follow their customs. And if they ask for Elias Ward, show respect. You're walking on his legacy. Meanwhile, Elias didn't sit in any throne. He didn't wear medals. He didn't make speeches. Didn't ask for recognition. He simply traveled from town to town, ruin to ruin, helping repair broken walls, rebuilding water lines, training defenders. He shared no words, but his actions said, Everything children followed him wherever he went. They copied his movements, played games where one of them was the silent warrior. And in every village, the elders carved his symbol. Into stone, the red hand with a black slash. One day, his Earth officers met with new Grelva leaders to draft peace terms. Something unusual happened. The Grelva commander, a former warlord, stood, walked to the Earth diplomat, and handed them a carved wooden token. On it was a simple mark. The red hand. He didn't kill our people, the commander said in slow English. Showed us who we were. Then he looked around the room. If you want peace on this world, let him guide it. Earth's officers looked at each other. Even now, Leas Ward had said nothing, but somehow it had become the one everyone trusted to rebuild a broken planet. Late that night, as the stars burned above, Raka found Elias near a stream he was fixing, an old water purifier. They keep asking for you, she said quietly. Some think you're a prophet, others think you're a ghost. He looked at her, she smiled. I think you're just a man, but one who never gave up. Still no. Replied, but then, for the first time in weeks, Elias gave her a tired smile. Peace had returned to Zeretel. The queen was gone. The rebels were now leaders. Earth had set up aid stations, schools, and repair outposts. Villages were being rebuilt. Rivers ran clean again. But even with all the change, one thing stayed the same. They waited for Elias Ward. From broken war camps to distant forests. Everyone still told stories. He never said a word. He faced beasts, soldiers, assassins, and never flinched. He burned down a throne with his silence. And now they whispered something else. One day he'll speak. Leas Ward didn't ask for that. He just worked. Fixed water. Systems. Helped train young guards. Cleared mines. But everywhere he went, people followed. Aliens from different tribes. Ex-Grelva soldiers. Even Earth Marines. All of them drawn to him. Not because he spoke, but because he never needed to. General. Adira Holt sat in her mobile command center, watching footage from Zeretel. She shook her head in disbelief. We've sent entire armies into alien wars, she said. And it took one quiet man to do what diplomats never could. Her aide looked up from a tablet. There's something new. She handed Holt a data crystal. It contained a broadcast. From 5 different alien species, each one from a nearby star system, they all said the same thing. We saw the man who brought silence and peace to Zeretel. We wish to speak with him, not Earth, him. Raka walked with Elias across a rebuilt bridge over the river Tarn. She spoke softly. They want to know your secret. He raised an eyebrow. She smiled. How you led without speaking. How you united. Us all. What you really believe. Still, he said nothing, until they reached a group of children playing nearby. One of the boys fell, scraped his knee, and cried. Elias knelt, cleaned the wound, and handed the boy a small wooden toy carved. From ship metal, the child stared at him. Why don't you ever talk? The camp went quiet. Raka watched carefully. Everyone did. Elias paused. Then, the first time in front of anyone, said one word. His voice was rough, deep, but strong. He looked at the boy and said, Listen. Silence. Followed, the child stopped crying. The rebels stopped moving. Raka felt her heart skip. He stood slowly, looked at the crowd, and said again louder this time, You don't need noise to lead. You don't need noise to fight. You don't need noise to love. He looked to the sky. But when you speak, speak only when it matters. The message spread across Zeretel in minutes, then across Earth's networks, then across space. Ships from other species broadcast it, translated it, etched it into stone. The first word spoken by the unspoken fire. Listen, in the Galactic Senate, where over 300 civilizations once mocked humans for being young, impulsive, and loud ambassadors, stood to share the message. A man who spoke only once, one senator said, has said more than we have in lifetimes. The chamber applauded. Back on Zeretel, Elias didn't return to command posts or military halls. He sat under a tree outside the rebuilt city of Karadin and watched the stars. Raka joined him. They want to name cities after you, she said. He shook his head. You could lead Earth's next mission, she said. Another shake. Then what now? She asked. He looked up, smiled, and finally replied, teach others to do it better. So he did, not with speeches, not with banners, but with example. He trained leaders who led with empathy, fighters who chose peace first, children who grew into builders, not destroyers, and soon, across systems far beyond Zuratel, the way of the unspoken fire became a teaching, a path, a belief. In time, Elias Ward's name faded into legend, but his message, his single word, echoed forever, across galaxies, carved into steel. Listen.